how would you introduce yourself as you step into this space?
Well, I think it's definitely different to what I would have done about 2 to 3 years ago. 2 to 3 years ago, I would have started with a title, where I work, what I'm currently doing. But what really makes sense to me now is I'm a woman who's on a mission to get people to start to trust themselves again and to really change the way that people feel about themselves. And for me, that is the most important thing. If that's how I would introduce myself today, that would be it. And I do want to take 2 minutes just to introduce you as well, because you're an incredible person who's come into my space in the most incredible way. Anesu is actually a doctor who and who's come into this incredible space and really has embodied, for me, elegant power. And that's why, for me, you were just one of the first people that came to mind to help me host today. All of your work around health and wellness, yoga, just so aligns to the path that I'm on. And for me, your grounded energy, your elegant power is just the best, connection for me. So I really want to thank you as well as we start this off. And it's always fun when you've written your first book about the nervous system and you ask an MD to sit next to you. So I just want to thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Even though I won't give you that as a title, because you're so much more than that. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone else knew in the room knew it as well.
Thank you, Nikki. Yes, so we're not strangers amongst each other. My journey has really been one of searching, I think, for this path to success through ease. I began my professional career as a medical doctor and had always dreamed of doing that, but didn't find fulfillment within it. Quite similar, I guess, to your story. And so through mindfulness, through meditation and through yoga, I've spent a lot of my time trying to figure out what that meaning I've been searching for looks like and what it is. And what I've discovered is a part of that is having meaningful conversations with people who are on a similar path, as I'm sure a lot of you are, where a lot of us don't really feel connected to our work, connected to our jobs. We spend most of our time doing these things, but if they don't make your heart sing, you end up feeling like something is missing. And I think that ties in so well to this conversation, because there is something within us, an elegant power within each and every one of us that deserves listening to, that deserves following. And I think it's so inspiring that you have picked up the pen and put down your story of how you have found your own elegant power to help the rest of us do the same. But this is not the beginning of your journey. This is the second book on your journey of storytelling. And your journey really began with the 7 Steps to Finding Flow. Can you tell us a bit about that book? What made you believe that you could become an author and that your words and your thoughts were worth being told?
Well, I often say that it's almost like I didn't have a choice. It was a journey that I've been on to heal, my journey to health and wellness. Something inside me said there was a different way. After walking out of a doctor's office with a script as long as my arm, with a diagnosis within 5 minutes, something in me said there's a different way. And on a run, it was around my complex. No, luckily, I had a buffer around my neck. I was going to conveniently pull it up if I saw anyone coming, but it was at about 5:30 in the morning, so I was fairly assured I wouldn't see anyone else. I just decided I needed to share, because I knew that there were so many other people that had been struggling with something very similar to myself, whether it be stress, whether it be the story I was telling myself about my stress. And I got back to the kitchen and I scribbled everything down, and then I left it for a while and I went, who am I to do this? Because that was really a book around survival and my path to heal, having really supported my health over, and healing in under 6 months, a journey that takes most people 2 to 3 years. But it was almost like the universe just kept nudging me and kept bringing the opportunities and bringing the right people into my path in order to make this happen. And I think eventually I just went, okay, I'm listening, I'm going to do this. And it was really a journey, and a continuing journey, because you're never done when it comes to healing. You start off the process and you become more well, and it's amazing how once you've accessed that feeling again after having lost it, and I'm sure many people have stories like that, you're not prepared to go back. And it was almost like the second book was born out of the first book, that, you know, after the survival piece, it was that continual leveling up, where all of a sudden I went, okay, now it's time to shine, now it's time to do something with this, and really step into who I am as a person. I think once I grounded myself into that foundation of having healed, having stepped into a different path that I think many people, especially many people who've known me over the years, would ever see me on.
And did it feel different writing this book compared to your first one?
It felt completely different. The first book, I was a lot less sure. I think I sent so many excerpts to so many different people. What do you think about this? I asked for validation around so many different components, and I don't think I'd really stepped into my voice, I think is the best way I can put it. You know, you kind of like, and I got the question. It was almost like that self-doubt came through in an interview, and I had Gareth Cliff ask me the question, who are you to do this?
Of all people to ask you.
Of all people. And luckily I knew going into that interview it was not going to be a calm interview or an easy one. He said to me, you're not a doctor, you're not a psychologist, who are you to write this? And it was amazing because this almost indignation came through, and I was like, who am I not to write this book? But it was amazing how it's a continual leveling up. And you know, I said to him, I said, so many of the books we read are by academics and they're theoretical, but most of these people have never lived this. They've given you a diagnosis and they've sent you away, but they've never been the person in my first book who was sitting in that toilet cubicle going, oh God, I can't get my thoughts together right now, or had to deal with the impact of significant illness. And for me, that's what I've really embraced, was how did I take all of my learning and information and research that I've put into a more accessible way for people. Because I think when you're that stressed out and you're in survival mode, you can't read, you know, white papers on, you know, the parasympathetic nervous system and polyvagal theory. I don't still know how I managed to get all of that done, but I think I was that determined and that much of a nerd that I wanted to get it done. But Anesu, to your point, this book, I think I showed, in fact, I showed it to Marie, who's sitting at the back here, and I showed it to my friend Tina, who's currently in Cape Town. And before I submitted it to the publisher, I literally went, it's just what it needs to be. I'm going to be unapologetic about this one. And I think the process was stepping into this whole journey. And there was definitely, and a few people have said this to me, there was a grittiness to my voice. And I basically, after I wrote the manuscript, I went, this won't be for everyone. And I'm quite okay with that. I wrote in the book, I don't want to be everyone's cup of tea. I'd rather be someone's shot of whiskey. And for me, that's really embodies the second book's process, because I knew that this was the message that needed to come through. It came through when the time was right. I'd set everything up to start writing in August, and you know what it's like when you try and force something. It never comes. Well, no, it just didn't come.
It didn't come.
I was ready. I was, you know, like procrastination is not normally something I struggle with, but it was almost like the because it knows me too well. And literally, I was just like, it's just, I didn't feel the energy was there, and I went away for a long weekend to Emily Moon River Lodge, and I'd taken my stuff with me. And literally nobody saw me for the entire weekend. I literally sat and it just started. And it didn't stop from there. And that's when I just knew that this was the story that needed to come out, and the book that needed to come.
It's funny how both of your books almost seem to embody the stage of life that you're in, or the emotions that you're feeling. And I, even having read both books, found that the first book was very much citing these academic papers, you know, we're talking about the biology of stress, we need to make sure that people will take it seriously. And then the second book, we're talking about intuition and energy, you know, all of these things that the universe. And you do have to be unapologetic when you're talking about things that, I loved it. Me and Nikki had a very short conversation before this evening, and we were talking about how when you're discussing things that are woohoo, you have to be really sure about what it is that you were saying. And you had a little anecdote about the woohoo.
And those of you who know me as a reformed accountant, so for a lot of people this feels very out of my, you know, what you'd perceive my comfort zone to be. But I've said this a few times to people, I've reframed woohoo as woohoo! We really need to like step into the fact that there is more out there than logic and the things that we, you know, can see and feel.
That we can measure, that are tangible. It's more about the things that we feel and the things that we experience. And it really did feel like you embracing that side of yourself within this book. I mean, elegant power is not, you know, we hear a lot of buzzwords within the wellness industry. It's like present-mindedness, mindfulness, you know, come into the now. But I haven't heard elegant power before, and you have a lovely definition in the book on elegant power. Do you want me to read the definition? Would you like to read the definition?
I'm happy to read it.
Yes, please do, please do. Just so that we know exactly what it is that we're talking about.
And before I get into that, the gentleman to my left was actually the first person who about 4 years ago said to me, we were talking about a conversation to go for a role within my corporate career, and he said to me, use your elegant power. And it really just resonated with me. But I think it was something that evolved into such a big concept for me, because for me it's really around, you know, how do we step into it in everything that we do, not just a conversation, but how we really show up. And yeah, this was something that came on the banks of a river, and it didn't actually get edited once, which was the biggest like crazy moment for me, because normally I edit and I polish and you go backwards and forwards. This one didn't change, and in fact an editor suggested a change and I went, no, it's not changing, this is exactly as it needs to be. Elegant power, a state of standing grounded in reverence of your own self-worth, sure in your sense of self, basking in the humble glow of the natural light of your individual gifts. You embrace all you have to offer to the world and yourself from an empowered, authentic, and unarmored state of grace. You acknowledge all aspects of yourself, light and shadow, knowing that they create the depth and color in your own personal landscape. No justification required, rather you standing in full ownership of your growth and your journey. Elegant power needs no explanation. It empowers and supports you and those around you from a place of easeful energy and thoughtful simplicity. It comes from tuning into the inner gardens of our individual knowing, supported by our soul, flow, and grace. It is that internal voice that whispers, I am here, I am worthy. This is what I am here for, and I'm deserving of it all. When you start to trust yourself, that whisper loudens, it deepens, permeating every cell as you remember all that you are and step out of the shroud of your societal conditioning. You unshackle from the shoulds, the perceived expectations of yourself, creating a fire within that emanates from a place of calm, centered sureness. You can say, this is me, and that is golden.
Absolutely got that, and it's a definition again that you feel as you read through it. What I also love is you use the word power specifically, and in a later part of the book you talk about the difference between power and force. Can you talk through that a little bit?
I think for me it was such an important word to use. because I think for so long people have confused power with force. You see so much of that sort of forceful energy nowadays. I mean, specifically after having navigated the last 2 years, you get a lot of that sort of energy that almost feels offensive when it comes into your space. And you know, I've quoted a couple of sources that I've used to look at this definition, but for me, one of the best ways that I like to look at power is it's like gravity. It moves things without even having to move itself. Force is something that produces a counterforce that makes you feel like you need to respond. And I think for so long, we've misused power, or we've used it in the concept of power over rather than power for. Because when we start to talk about power for good, that's the most incredible, you know, sort of way to experience it, where you literally stand centered, sure in yourself, influencing the world around you and people around you through your energy and your presence alone, rather than that domineering force that we tend to see so much of. Anne Lamott has an incredible quote that I love, and it's in the book as well. And she says, "A lighthouse doesn't run all over the island looking for boats to save. It just stands there glowing." And I think, I've paraphrased her slightly there, but the quote is in the book. But for me, that's the best way to actually look at the idea of how it just really just emanates from within.
And you talk about, we referenced it a little bit in the introduction, of how a lot of us are almost burdened with these shoulds that society has made us believe define us. You know, you should earn this amount of money, you should get married at this age, you should have kids. And a lot of us, I guess that's the force that you're talking about. A lot of us introduce ourselves with these titles, feeling like we want a reaction, someone to congratulate us on this promotion because we're now this title, or congratulate us on this because we've got this new opportunity. And that's kind of that forceful energy that you're talking about. Talk to us about what your dismantling of the shoulds looked like and letting go of those titles.
Well, I think in order to understand that, I think it's really important to understand how those shoulds come to play in our lives. It's either through the stories that we're told, growing up, the stories we tell ourselves, the expectations we put on ourselves, and often no one else is holding them for us. We've just internalized them. And then we create this narrative for ourselves that lives, but actually half the time it's not serving us. In fact, most of the time those shoulds are no longer serving us. And I often say to people that I've worked with, think about how many times you say should during the day. And as soon as I catch myself saying should, I go, oh, maybe that's not really something I should actually be doing, ironically. And I think it's that storytelling, whether it be something we've heard through society, from our parents, from family, that we've ascribed to ourselves, the pressure we put on ourselves, the expectation. No one ever told me to chase a corporate career and a title, but you get caught up in this, you know, self-fulfilling prophecy, and it becomes a whirlwind, and next thing you know, you're sitting in a place that you're going, I'm not sure I really want that anymore. And there's so many constructs and paradigms that exist within society that help reinforce those shoulds, that keep us shackled because we think that someone will judge us if we don't do that. Meanwhile, often it's just the voice within our head and our own thought pattern that actually keeps us small, that keeps us tame, and that keeps us from living our best, most easeful life. I often say to people is think about what your gifts are. What are the things that you love doing? And I know it's often hard for people to actually be introspective and think about what your personal gifts are, because for so long we've been told we can't shout things from the rooftops. You know, it's again another should.
You have to shrink.
Yeah, but who are you to like claim the space? But our bodies feel that, our nervous systems feel that, and it's really time to step out of that and really just embrace, you know, the power and the magic that each of us have, because in that for me lies the secret to our path to success through ease. But we really have to step out of those things that keep us small, that we've been told we shouldn't have, that we shouldn't claim for ourselves. And I think it's time for us each to start owning those natural gifts, those unique gifts that we need more of. I often find that, anyone who's worked in business or, whether it be as an entrepreneur or within corporate, we often get told that or you feel that these are the ways you should show up, these are the attributes you should have. But actually that's often just the gifts of a few, rather than what makes, you individually special. We need all of that. And I think we'd be so much richer if everyone really lived their individual gifts and stepped out of the shadow of things that keep us stuck.
And this attachment to the shoulds a lot of the time is feeling an obligation to society, to our families, to our loved ones. And so once you take that obligation away, what I get from a lot of my colleagues in medicine is, I don't know what else I'm good at. What else do I do if I'm not a doctor? So once you're able to reflect and recognize that maybe you've been living according to somebody else's definition of success or achievement, how do you cultivate a degree of trust in your own abilities in order to make that decision to go on a different path or to change the way that you're doing things?
For me, it's a journey. It's never a once-off download that comes to you and you all of a sudden know. It's a layering of support that you give yourself, that you affirm through experiences that you've had and feedback that you've received. And those moments where you know that actually that was awesome, that's where I felt lit up. But too often we stay busy, we're on the hamster wheel and we're chasing someone else's definition of success. And we don't really take the time to quieten our minds, get back into our bodies, and actually get grounded in, how does this feel for me? And I think we all know, we've all had those moments where you feel lit up and life is just easeful. But I think we've been taught, whether it be from being a child, the stories we were told, how we've navigated life, that we think we can control things. And we think that picture in our heads, we all know, that house with the white picket fence, and someone actually painted me a very detailed picture the other day. She was like, I need a Range Rover, I need a Labrador, I need a white picket fence, I need 2.5 kids. I was like, good Lord. I was like, you've left no room for magic in your life. Because often it sort of sweeps you, and next thing you know, the most magical solution has come through that you could never have even imagined. But it does take getting grounded within our bodies and building that faith within ourselves. I often say, that inner knowing, that North Star, where you learn to trust yourself again, that's the absolute magic. And I often say to people, I know I've got my own back. I've packed my own parachute. That's all of that magic in life, is you learn to trust yourself again, and you're not going to have all the answers. In fact, someone says to me, where to from here? And I said, who knows? But I know it's going to be magic. I know I've got faith that whatever unfolds from here will be where I'm meant to be heading. And it's not going to look like some cookie cutter, prescriptive path that someone said I needed to be on. But it's been a gradual learning to trust myself. And it's almost like the more I've trusted myself, the more life has stepped up and just said, she gets it. Finally. She's let go. She stopped holding on to everything. She thought she had to. I was the ultimate A+ nerd, who thought I could control everything. Yeah, Jack knows. That I thought I could make things happen through my sheer will alone. But actually, you just put yourself in a hole at the end of the day. And often we get signs from the universe that kept coming. I got them. I kept going, no, not that. No, not that. And they got a bit stronger and a bit louder, and they were like, you're not listening. And eventually, and I talked to it in this book, obviously I can't go into a lot of detail, a lot of personal detail, because I wanted to keep certain things, respect other individuals. I got sent a situation that I could no longer ignore. It literally was like the universe said, I'm going to make this so heinous that you have no choice. That your body will feel it within every inch of its being, that you have to step away. You've got to learn to start trusting yourself. And I think, it was really that moment where I went, okay, I'm really going to trust that path. And I don't know what the future holds. And I think, to your point, I think we think that it can only be safe when we know what that picture looks like that we're moving towards, rather than allowing that path to unfold and having faith that it will be even better than we could have imagined.
I love that you use the word magic, because I think that word lights up a little child inside each and every one of us. There's this quote by Roald Dahl which says, those who don't believe in magic will never find it. And it's very much that, where there is a moment where the precipice is that decision to trust and to recognize the signs that have been pushed into your face for so long, and to allow yourself that childlike curiosity of just maybe believing, you know? Do you feel sometimes that you are connecting to that little girl that once was in some ways?
Even more so, the last 2 years, and Sam at the back knows, I built more adult Lego in the last 2 years than I think most kids did. And I had the most fun. You know, I think we have to allow ourselves to just feel into what lights us up, even though, you know, I had someone say to me, but girls don't build Lego. I was like, I love the fact that you called me a girl. But, you know, but I think I had more fun than a lot of kids did. And I think it's because we just let ourselves play and we let ourselves have fun. Because life is too short. If the last 2 years have not taught us anything, it's that we should be here for joy and happiness. And we need to bring more life back into our lives. And we need that magic. My theme for my 40th was actually magic moments and memories, because if we don't have room for that in our lives, well, what the hell are we doing working so hard? So yeah, for me, I'm open to all of that magic, and life, when you look for it, to your quote, it comes. It really does come. But I used to be too busy, and then I thought I could make magic happen. That's the biggest fantasy of them all, because we can't make magic happen. We really can't. We have to allow it to happen.
And I love that it's, again, that gentle balance between taking inspired action, but also having those moments where we simply sit, ground, embody ourselves, and allow that inspiration to come, just like you did with this book as well. And do you ever, on this journey, I mean, building your Lego, when you're telling these stories, does everyone ever say to you, oh, Nikki, you're so selfish, building Legos, you know, while you could be out there solving financial crisis, whatever it may be. You know, you actually have a chapter, I've got it right here, chapter 8, in your book, which is self first, not selfish. And this idea that focusing on ourselves and really taking our happiness seriously is not an act of selfishness, but instead putting ourselves first so that we can actually be better for others.
And I think for me, this is another one of those paradigms that we have to shift. We have to change our perspective on. Because for so long, I know as a kid, I was told, no, you have to give to others first. Give in order to receive, you know? And again, that meant giving to everyone else first, for ourselves. But I firmly believe that self first and putting yourself at the front of the energy cube, putting that oxygen mask on, is actually the most radical form of self-love. Because if we can't give of our best energy to ourselves, what have we got left to give everyone else in our lives? And that's why I always say to people, I said, it's all about, we still show up with love and empathy and connection, but we do it from a place that's actually meaningful, it's connected, it's full of all of our best energy. And we forget that our energy is actually contagious. I mean, we've all been in that situation where someone's walked through the door and literally just dumped everything on you. And all of a sudden you're sitting there going, holy crap, that just feels like, whew. And, you know, so sometimes if we don't take those moments to fill up our own energy tanks, you know, we can't give that best energy when we walk in. And we'll all have those moments. They're completely natural and completely human. But I often say, like, and I talk about it in the book as well, be responsible in terms of how you manage your energy around others. You know, in terms of when you walk into something, you just go like, can I just have a moment? And then that person can actually go, sure, great, bring it. I'm ready for all of that energy that you're about to bring. And then you can really get connected, grounded, and feel supported. But you honor the other person at the same time. But we can't do that unless we've taken those moments to support ourselves. When we put ourselves at the end of the energy queue, we end up reactive. We end up triggered. We end up giving people that really bottom of the barrel kind of energy, which doesn't serve anyone.
And this is linked to the part of your book where you talk about boundaries. And this is I've been waiting the whole evening to quote this chapter. Boundaries are badass, basically, is the name of the chapter. Tell us about boundaries, and this is exactly what you're talking about, of taking responsibility for your own energy and recognizing that you have the power to allow specific people, situations into your space, and that is actually your boundary to uphold.
I think for me, boundaries are so important in all of this, because we often think that boundaries are something that someone else is supposed to respect or hold for us. But that for me is the biggest myth. The only person responsible for holding your boundaries is yourself. And for me, that is where we can really then connect with the other person authentically, because we've been able to say, this is and what isn't acceptable for me. Because I know even a couple of years ago, I used to get indignant when someone overstepped my boundary. Meanwhile, it was like a scuffed chalk mark on the floor. I hadn't been that clear about it. So how could anyone else know where it was? And when they did, half the time I'd feel like an electric fence going, how dare you? Rather than what I call the gentle garden gate, which is just like, no more. We're done with that. And it's holding that space of connection, because, boundaries enable us to remain connected. Where we've been overgiving for so long and allowing people to overstep that mark, that's where, where we think we need to have consensus the whole time. But actually, that's where we end up in that resentful energy.
Another should.
Yeah, another should. Rather than honoring, that need for connection, but that is authentically grounded in your boundaries. And for me, that's why they're just so important. They're pivotal to how we manage our energy, how we show up, how we give our best energy to ourselves as well, because we're worth it. No one else is going to give it to us. We don't give it to ourselves. So for me, they're just the cornerstone of everything within our lives.
And so a lot of people think then, if you're upholding your boundaries, you're being intentional about how you use your energy, they kind of envision this monk in the middle of the mountains, not wanting anyone to bother them, and there's this conception that that's what this life looks like once you end up instilling all of these things into your life. What does it look like to you, and what do you think about that whole misconception?
Yeah, I mean, I love that energy. I've spent a fair amount of time in Nepal and places like that, so I really love that energy. But mine's more of the Marvel Comics Doctor Strange version of that. But what I always say to people is, a lot of people also think you have to step out of your life, that you have to do less in order to be more zen and more, mindful and practice all of those things.
You have to lose parts of yourself.
Yeah. But I actually think you become more yourself, and you can get more done, because you're no longer triggered and reactionary, and your attention isn't caught up with the things that you should be paying attention to. You're doing the stuff that lights you up, that serves the world and people around you best. So for me, you just become more yourself. You can have those moments. Maybe levitate off a couch, who knows?
That'll be nice.
But for me, the biggest thing is just really centering and getting back into yourself and showing up with that energy that you bring so much more magic into the world. I talk about the fact that for so long we've always spoken about IQ and EQ, but we haven't spoken about what I call the SQ. A lot of people have called it that. It's like your soul, your spiritual quotient, but it's really on how you're in your body. That word embodiment really brings you back into your body. And without that, if you're just focusing on IQ and EQ, you're a bit of a wobbly stool. Whereas I say that if you're really getting grounded back into your body, you're paying attention to your body knows that it's taken care of, and it's amazing how much more centered and grounded you become. So you do emulate moments of that sort of Buddhist monk-like energy. But for me, you do it in a way that just really is almost contagious for others. It's like they can feel it and just go, oh, I can relax now.
I just felt more relaxed. Just see your hands like that. It's like, oh, yes.
But we need more of that, especially now in 2022. We really do.
Yeah. And I love how you say it's about coming back to yourself instead of, some people think it's about becoming a new person, you know, discovering something completely new, but actually it's tapping into parts of yourself that were always there. And have you found that in reconnecting with those parts of yourself that you have almost recognized how much more capable you are? You know, one of the things that ends up happening with magic, let's call it that, is that one magical thing leads to the other, and you end up setting a goal of one book and publishing two. You know, so it's funny how that momentum builds. Have you experienced that?
Absolutely. And I think it's really just as you learn to trust yourself more and more from that perspective, and really just know that you are already enough. I often, and I share stories during the book that really, you know, have been throughout my life. And it's one of the things I reflected on. It's to remind you that you've always been enough. You didn't need to become, you didn't need to achieve, you didn't need to strive to become more. And I think from that perspective is the more there's almost been that layering of confidence, the more your body just gets it and it says, okay, like you've always been capable, you just believe it. And I think for me it's that deepening of your knowing back into yourself.
It's a real exhale to recognize that the thing that we've been searching for has always been with you and belongs to you as well, that nobody has to give that to you in any sense. And you talk about the body and embodying the body in order to become present, but it's so interesting how in your first book, your body was almost, started off being your worst enemy, really, stopping you from doing the things that you wanted to do, creating limitations in your life. And now that's changed to your body being this amazing tool or guide on your journey.
Well, it's kind of like my universal team. You know, you can't treat your body as something separate from you and blame it when it doesn't support you. Because actually, if you're not taking care of it, you're not listening to it, thinking it should do all of these things that we want it to do, and that it's not keeping up with you. I often say it's like, you know, a car that you haven't serviced. I mentioned that in the first book. And you just kind of keep going, well, why are you letting me down? Why is my health not keeping up? Why am I always sick? And we can't make those excuses anymore. And I think for me the most interesting thing is I've seen a lot of people who've been very conscious over the last 2 years forget those lessons, forget that journey very quickly in 2022. And I already heard it just the other day. Someone turned to me and said, oh, like I'm feeling awful, I'm always sick now. I said, well, where was all of that intentionality that you brought into the last 2 years? We can't lose that, we can't go backwards. Because there was a reason that we needed to bring that to the fore and remember that for ourselves.
And that takes, like you say, conscious, intentional action. And one of the gifts that you give us in both of your books is, we talk about the woohoo, we talk about it, we discuss it, but these are intangible, quite difficult to pin down topics, right? And then you make it practical by providing journal prompts or actual exercises in the books that people can do to bring these concepts home. What was that exercise like for you? And do you find that people actually do the journal prompts or the exercises? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm chuckling because a lot of people said to me, they're fabulous. I read through all of them, but yeah, no, I didn't write any of that stuff because it was a little too confronting. And this came from the first book. And for me, the magic is doing the work. You look at my coffee table, like some of my friends have seen them. I'm that person who like sticks together a whole bunch of moleskin journals and wraps them up. I'm always writing something, and that for me is my magic in processing. You can't run away from this awareness. Without the awareness, without the really stepping into this, we don't get consciousness. And then it becomes something that we're like, yeah, cool, that was interesting, I'm fine, I've got it, let's carry on and move on. we don't really embed it. We don't take that intentionality with us. And I don't get it perfect. There's days when I'm like, oh, I've got to try again tomorrow, and I'm not going to be hard on myself because we don't need perfectionism. But I do think you need that balance between that more esoteric, sort of faith-based side of things with the science. I think that's the magic that comes through because we need all of that.
And I'm so glad that you kept it in. You know, often I wonder with authors if you get feedback from one book and then you feel like you have to change your entire style according to the feedback. But especially with this book, like we said, the theme is or the tone is unapologetic. And it's more a case of the people who want to read this will read it and will enjoy the work. And for those people who it's not for, it's simply not for. Do you resonate with coming to that sort of viewpoint of your books?
Completely. Someone actually said to me, but they're for different audiences. And I said, no, they're just for an audience at different stages of their journey. But I'm always that person, I'm always a journaler, I'm always writing stuff down. So for me it had to be in there. But the new edition in this one is the Elegant Power playlist, which is now on Spotify at the end.
That's a woohoo!
Yeah, completely. Especially since I speak about the kitchen dance party, because for me that's one of my best ways to change my energy. Music for me changes my mood. And I've actually had to dance on national TV before, which I didn't think was going to happen, but it did, and I just decided, right, this is one of those moments where you've got to own it, you've got to own what you do every day in your kitchen. And so for me it's around how do you bring that fun into that practice. Because as Sandra Bullock said, you know, listening to a song in the morning changes the way you walk out into the world. And for me it's been fundamental. In fact, that was, I think, the thing that leveled me up in the first year of COVID. Was the number of dance parties I had in my kitchen that I could never have in the office because someone would have said, what is she on? We've got to have more fun. And it really does change our energy. It's one of my quickest way to change my mood. And immediately. So we've done interviews with Gareth Cliff, basically. We've done dancing on national television. So what are the challenges there in store for you? I mean, you know, a lot of people think that on this path, it's almost like there's a finish line that you reach, you're meditating every day, you're journaling, and all of your problems just disappear and you live the most blissful life thereafter. Obviously not the case. No, it's a continual journey, and I think we just have to keep walking that path. And it was an incredibly vulnerable journey. This is not, I mean, I really had that doubt. It was reflected back at me of who am I to do this? We won't even look at the banner behind me in terms of the cover of this book. But I mean, I even had that moment in publishing my first book, sitting over coffee with Brad, and I said to him, oh, I think I'm just going to self-publish. Like, who needs to really read this? And he's like, no. And he started texting his publisher and he was going to do an intro. That was a Saturday morning. Sunday I sent the proposal through. By Wednesday I had a publishing contract and I went, oh, I now have no choice. I'm done.
I think you might have used other words.
So, yeah, sometimes it just takes the choice out, but it's that vulnerability, that stepping through that and continuing on that path, because you know, we're all human. We catch ourselves, you know, as much as we get intentional, and it's just around how quickly you get back on the path and keep going and try and do better again tomorrow.
And I mean, my final question before we're going to open it up to the floor, but let's talk about this amazing cover. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to put your face on the cover of a book. You know, the covers of this book is very different to the cover of your first book. What was that process like? And are you still getting used to it? Do you still do a double take?
I think I've just kind of gone, okay, everything's as it needs to be, but I actually didn't have a choice too much in the cover. And that's going to sound really weird to some people. I did a brand shoot actually with Charles. If he's still around, if he's out there. And at the end of the shoot, we were done. And he said, oh, let's go in through and find a few more locations. And you know, I was just mentioning, Charles, I'm just talking about the process to get that shot. And it really, we entered this lounge and we took a few more photos and, you know, finished up the shoot. and he sent a few through, and I was like, oh. And he was like, and I'd already designed a completely different cover. It was going to be very aligned to my first cover, so it felt like the books kind of really linked together. And I sent that brief to my graphic designer, and you know, after Charles had sent the photo through and kind of went, I went, okay, well here's maybe another like left field option. She didn't even design the other covers. She actually didn't even, she just ignored them, and the next day I got the photo and she's like, there's your cover, done. And the publishers did exactly the same thing. So I was like, okay, again, it was one of those moments of like learning to trust yourself and stepping into that moment where you have to actually own this journey and own the path that you're walking, because anyone who's written a book, you know, we teach what we're learning. We teach the path that we've been walking. And we continue to do that, and it's a continual leveling up. And I think this was one of the most confronting ways of me really like walking my path. But I think I've just had to get over it and go, okay. But for those of you who know me, I am a Leo, and someone did turn around to me and go, fucking Leo. So yeah, I just kind of went, okay, I'm going to own it here. So please excuse the swearing, but that's a direct quote. I felt it was appropriate.
I think it's perfect. It's owning your elegant power. Yeah, I mean, if that's not owning your elegant power, I don't know what is. Really, it's a beautiful image, an incredible book. I think we could chat about it for hours. But let's open it up. Does anyone have any questions for Nikki about either her journey or on the book itself? Anything that you would like to know? I'll open it up, and we'll just keep it conversational. If there's anything you want to mention, or even comments as well, are totally welcome.
How do you align Japanese thing with Ikigai and purpose? Is it be the same or similar?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's completely aligned. I mean, there's so many things that I've brought in and come to this, and a lot of it's been my own journey. I've referenced all of the people in the book that I've worked with, but I wouldn't say that was something I necessarily considered in aligning from that side of from that perspective. It was really just me tuning into what I knew. I think is the best way I can actually just put this. There were a lot of inspiring sources, but that wasn't really one of them from that perspective. But I think for me it's a continual search, but not one we can control, one we just have to be open to, really is my perspective.
Question. Remind me, Ikigai is the meeting point between the
It's
things that
finding purpose, something that you can, it's basically finding the purpose of what the world needs, what you can give, what you can get paid for.
What you love.
It's basically your purpose that you bring, the value that you create for yourself and the world.
So, and just to that point, because I speak about your unique gifts, I often believe that if we spend so much time trying to fit it into that mold, that we lose some of that magic around the things that really light us up. Because I think, and what I've found personally, and again, this is my journey, that I'm referencing here, it may be different for other people. You know, I found the more and more I stepped into those things that lit me up, and it created what I refer to as a slipstream in my life. And I think we've all had that feeling. That was where it just kept coming and kept coming. And it'll unfold how this becomes commercial, and you know, but I really know that this is needed. I've had too many like voice notes on Instagram with people in tears going, thank you for helping me, and I just went, okay. I always said my definition of success on the first book was if I can help one person. Yeah, and I think for me, I've been less intellectual about this, is basically the best way I can put it.
this bird is just going on a mission.
Firstly, I'd just like to say to Nikki, thank you, because you are a magical being. I've known you for quite some time, and that is the exact word I would use to describe you as a person, Nick, and the energy you bring, the life you bring to those around you, your soul concept, all of those kind of things. It is something to behold, it's something so uplifting to those who get to know you, especially in the new space that you have come into. I've been a long part of this journey, and it's been so wonderful to see where you have been and where you have come to, because it really has been magical, the transformation. And thank you for the second book, because there's so many of us in that situation that you have noted and that you have seen and that you've had knowledge through your own experiences that would never have had a voice. You don't have the either the penmanship or the foresight to be able to put it in words like you have, that enables us who are lagging behind to read the concept and be very grateful, and to enable us to then live that concept that we are striving toward. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Very special, and hopefully I've made your job a lot easier. Marie is my chiropractor, so she feels very less of this in my back. I know I've definitely made your job more easeful when it comes to me. Perfect. We'll go to Portia first and then to Ursula.
Next, I'd like to say as well, I was still intrigued by the first book, and then I saw you release the second book. I love this cover, it's very elegant. But what I want to ask you is, what keeps the momentum going for you? What would you say has worked for you as an author? What would you say to aspiring authors who are in a similar journey in terms of what they want to achieve?
Believe you can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, believe you can do it. And even when you don't quite believe it, just keep going. And the universe will step up and support you, because we need more people's stories to come into the world and to show an honest path, a real path. Because I do believe the stories are where the magic sits. I mean, you think about, sort of thousands of years ago, the magic was in the storytelling. We lost that. And we need people's stories to come through. So, imagine that Gareth Cliff moment in your head. If you're having that doubt of, who am I to do this? And just go, who am I not to do this? And there were many moments where I sat there going, whew, maybe I'll just push this under, I'll self-publish, I'm not going to put this anywhere. And then the universe took that choice away. And I know that was a very serendipitous moment where, it doesn't always happen that way. But keep believing in your story and keep sitting down to write, especially if you're a writer or whatever you do that brings that creativity through. We need more of that creativity and that magic. And I think just keep believing and taking the next step in front of you. You don't have to know the whole path. You just have to take the next step and then the next step, and it will just magically unfurl. 2.5 years ago, was I writing one book? No, never. And I just kept going, okay, I'm going to listen. And I didn't really know what would happen next, but I sat down in faith and I started writing. And by the way, just to let everyone know, Portia's book is coming out later this year. So just keep having that faith, and when you don't have that faith, phone me and I'll give you that faith until you believe it for yourself. Okay.
And I love how you also are so open about having those moments where nothing is coming. And I think for a lot of writers that almost signals okay, there's nothing more for me to write about, and people stop there. But it's about recognizing that that's also part of the process, right?
Well, it's actually the most cathartic thing I've ever done. I think this was part of my healing that went into these books. And I think for me, I got so much out of that process that's what kept me there, is new insights came. It's like when you're on a run or you're going for a walk and you process things. Mine came through my writing as much through, I call them those pauses for potency, where we create those limbic spaces where you can bring the unconscious into the conscious. That's the magic that happens when you're writing. And if you do it only for yourself, you do it for yourself. but the world needs more people to use their voices and speak up.
I have a follow-up question, unfortunately. I want to know about the writing process. So, once you started getting that momentum, you spoke about that process, but then how was did you have a daily routine, or how did it?
So I tend to be a little less balanced when I'm writing, or perfectly balanced, because it was a balance that worked for me. And so I was still holding down a full-time job, so I wrote on weekends and between 4 and 7 in the morning, and then often after work. But the inspiration just flowed to the extent that I normally used to get up at 5 and go to gym. I pointed to Sam. Sam is the royal we when it comes to gym. My body woke me up, and like I didn't even need coffee. It was like, get to that keyboard now and keep going. And it literally became a process that I was just like, everything else disappeared for those couple of weeks, for those 2 months. And I literally just went right, because half the time I couldn't even walk away from my keyboard. I'd go and make a cup of coffee and I'd run back and I'd keep typing, because the words were just coming faster than I could actually type. So for me, it was a process that I had to keep up with, but it took lots of hours sitting in that chair and just letting it come. And I always believe that you build that momentum and it does start to flow. But I didn't force it. I tried to force it 2 months before, and I just went, okay, it's not now. Let's just go and do other things and process other things and keep coming. But it very much is, it is dedication. It is time in that chair, and it is saying no to things to say yes to this process. I think I became antisocial for 2 months, really at the end of the day, but I also made space for it. I booked time away in different locations that I knew would be inspiring for me, and that created a whole different flow of energy. In fact, I think it was Marie who said to me, she said, I can tell when you were there. Because it did literally just come through from that perspective and take the energy in the place that I was. Does that answer your question?
It does.
It's not always the answer everyone wants.
4 o'clock.
Literally, I didn't have a choice. I'd sit up in bed and go, okay, that's what you have to write next. Like there was, and normally I'm a person who needs coffee and all of those good things to get that inspiration to start, to just kickstart things. Yeah. And it was, but my process I recognize is very different and maybe very weird to some people. But I start with that outline that's very detailed, I connect everything together, and then I just let it go. And let it flow.
Hi. I have a follow-up question. I'm a lot like you, I get into that like space.
Yes.
So as much as you need to be selfish and follow your process and all that, how do you navigate those relationships in life when you have those, it's not a duty, but you actually have to pay attention there and you have to do that. How do you yourself not feel selfish, but also explain to the other person that like, I've got to get this done?
Well, I think first of all, you create space for the people that matter, but you've also got to have that boundaried conversation up front. It says, this is why this is important to me, and this is why I need to make space for this writing, because I think it's important, either for your process, something you're going through and processing, or because of the message that you want to get out. And so I think you've also got to be quite grounded in that message for yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you're not sure why you're doing this for yourself, you're never going to hold that space for yourself and respect it. A lot of people will schedule a day a week to write, or a day on a Saturday, and they'll sit down and write then. I had an unbelievable mentor during my first book, and we used to create that space. We'd block it out in the diary. This time I didn't have to do any of that.
Yeah, so what if it's coming, you can't stop, and then like you have to do this thing and you're like, sorry, the inspire's here now, I gotta do it.
Yeah, and I think because I was so sure on what I needed to put into this book, and after the feedback from my first book, I knew that I needed to do this. So it literally was one of those things where I made certain space, but I was very unapologetic. This is my time to write. Like you'd make time for a child or a husband or a partner or whoever it is. this becomes a very big focus. And it was particularly difficult when you're trying to work at the same time, but I left the party. In fact, I said no to certain things. I left parties early. I was just like, this is my priority for the next 2 months. But I'm one of those people for whom willpower comes quite easily. So I recognize that for myself. I'm just very boundaried. If this is the top of my priority list and that's the next step I have to take, I love you all and I'll make time for you here, and this is the time that I can see you, that this is my time to write. And I think it's just being absolutely clear on why you're doing it.
But it does answer my question.
Okay.
What was the quote from the book? Boundaries are...
Boundaries are badass. But again, it comes down to like, why are you doing this? And like for me, this was the biggest slipstream ever. And that's why I talk to your path to success through ease, when you recognize that gift. And you know that there's things that you need to bring through, and you step into it and you own it. It just came. And I know, like another author said to me, damn it, I hate you because I struggle and it doesn't come. And I said, I can't explain it. I said, it's not a fiction book where I have to create characters, so that's a whole different ball game. This was something I was ready and prepped for at the start, and it just came from there.
Thank you so much, everybody. I think speaking through the book just adds so much more to it, and hearing your experience of writing it and your journey through it has really just made me enjoy the story of this book even more. And I really encourage, if you haven't read it already, definitely have a read. I've got both of your books. They don't look very glamorous now, and we've got lots of, they're definitely very well used books. But it has been an absolute pleasure and a real honor for me to be able to shine the light on you and discuss this book of yours, this incredible work of yours. I'm sure that everybody here, we're all your biggest cheerleaders, and I think we can't wait to see what is coming next. If something's coming next, we are keen to see what the next chapter of your journey holds. But in the meantime, we will all be following this chapter riveted and cheering you on along the way. Thank you so much.